She spilled wine on a billionaire's son and whispered, "Please don't hit me." The entire ballroom froze. Then a calm, dangerous voice cut through the silence. "You just threatened my employee." The man who stepped forward was a mafia boss, powerful, ruthless, and he'd just decided she was his to protect. That one accident made her the most untouchable woman in New York. Clara Rossi's hands trembled as she balanced the silver tray loaded with champagne flutes. The crystal glasses clinked softly with each step across the ballroom floor of the Riviera Grand Hotel. Around her, Manhattan's elite laughed and mingled in designer gowns and tailored suits, their jewelry catching the light from the massive chandeliers overhead. She didn't belong here. Not really. The Children's Cancer Research Charity Auction was the event of the season, and Clara had been working double shifts all week to cover the extra staff needed. Her feet ached in the required black heels, and the stiff, white blouse felt too tight around her collar. But she needed this job. More than anyone in this glittering room could possibly understand. "Excuse me, miss?" A woman with diamonds dripping from her ears snapped her fingers. "We've been waiting." "Coming right away, ma'am." Clara forced a smile and turned quickly. Too quickly. She didn't see the man stepping backward from the crowd, his phone pressed to his ear, his attention completely elsewhere. Their collision happened in slow motion. The tray tilted. Champagne arced through the air in a golden spray. Then came the wine. A full glass of Cabernet Sauvignon, deep red as blood, splashed across the front of a pristine white tuxedo. Time stopped. Clara's heart plummeted into her stomach as she stared at the spreading crimson stain. The man wearing the tuxedo, young, maybe 30, with slicked-back blonde hair and a face she recognized from magazine covers, looked down at his ruined jacket with an expression of pure disbelief. Ethan Royce, tech heir, billionaire, and currently soaked in expensive wine because of her. "Oh my God," Clara gasped, her tray clattering to the floor. "I'm so sorry, sir."
"I'm so sorry."
"Let me." She grabbed a napkin from a nearby table and reached toward him, but his hand shot out and clamped around her wrist like a vice. "Do you have any idea who I am?" His voice was low and venomous. The conversations around them died. Heads turned. Clara felt 100 pairs of eyes lock onto her. I'm sorry, Mr. Royce. It was an accident. Please, I'll pay for the cleaning." "Pay for it." He laughed, a harsh sound that made her flinch. "This tuxedo costs more than you make in 6 months, you stupid little." "Please." The word came out as a whisper. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes, felt her body starting to shake the way it always did when someone yelled at her. Old instincts kicked in: make yourself small, apologize, disappear. "Please don't hit me. I'll clean it again. I'll fix it, I promise. Please." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Someone gasped. Clara wanted to die right there on the marble floor. Ethan's grip tightened. His face twisted with rage. "Hit you? You think I'd waste my time? You just threatened my employee." The voice cut through the ballroom like a blade, deep, calm, and absolutely glacial. Everyone turned. A man stood from a table near the windows, unfolding from his chair with the kind of unhurried grace that suggested he'd never rushed for anything in his entire life. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black suit that probably cost even more than Ethan's ruined tuxedo. His dark hair was styled back from a face that could have been carved from stone, sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, and eyes so dark they looked almost black in the chandelier light. Clara had served his table earlier. She remembered because he'd been the only person all night who'd said, "Thank you," when she'd poured his water. Matteo Ricci. The name whispered through the crowd like wind through leaves. Clara didn't know much about him, only that he owned half the commercial real estate in Manhattan and had a reputation for being ruthless in business. He donated to charity. He appeared at all the right events. But there was something about him that made people nervous. He walked toward them now, each step measured and deliberate. The crowd parted automatically. "Mr. Ricci." Ethan's voice had lost some of its edge, but He didn't release Clara's wrist. This clumsy waitress just let her go. It wasn't a request. Ethan hesitated for just a second too long. Mateo stopped directly in front of them, and even though he didn't raise his voice or make any threatening gesture, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees.
Now.
Ethan released Clara's wrist. She stumbled back, cradling her arm. Mateo picked up a clean napkin from the nearest table, turned, and handed it to Clara. His fingers brushed hers for just a moment, warm, steady. His eyes met hers, and she saw something unexpected there. Not pity, not anger, something else entirely. "You're fine," he said quietly, his voice completely different than the ice he'd used on Ethan. "Go get another tray. Take 5 minutes in the back if you need them." Clara nodded mutely, unable to speak. She grabbed the fallen tray and fled toward the kitchen, feeling her face burn with humiliation. Behind her, she heard Mateo speak again, his voice returning to that terrifying calm. "You might want to learn to speak to people without making them shake, Royce. Especially when 300 witnesses are watching. Or can't Daddy's PR team fix everything?" The crowd erupted in barely suppressed whispers. Clara pushed through the kitchen doors and leaned against the wall, her whole body trembling. She'd just been defended by one of the most powerful men in New York. She should feel grateful. So why did his words, "You just threatened my employee," sound less like rescue and more like a warning to everyone else in that room? And why had his eyes, when they met hers, looked at her like she was something he'd just decided to keep? In the kitchen, Clara splashed cold water on her face, trying to steady her breathing. The other servers gave her pitying looks, but kept their distance. Nobody wanted to be associated with the girl who'd just humiliated Ethan Royce in front of Manhattan's elite. "You okay?" Miguel, the head server, appeared beside her with a concerned frown. That was intense. "I'm fine." Clara dried her face with a paper towel, avoiding his eyes. "I need to get back out there. Actually, the manager said you can take the rest of the night off." "What?"
Panic seized her chest. "No."
"Miguel, please. I need these hours." "I can't." "It's paid," he interrupted gently. Mr. Ricci apparently had a word with management. Said you handled the situation professionally and deserve the evening to recover. You're still getting your full shift pay plus a bonus. Clara stared at him. What? Yeah, Miguel shook his head in disbelief. "I've been working these events for 10 years. Never seen anything like it." Royce looked like he wanted to crawl under the floor by the time Ricci was done with him. Apparently, 3 different people were already recording when it happened. It's probably going viral as we speak.
Great.
Just what she needed, her most humiliating moment broadcast across social media. But she couldn't afford to lose hours. "I should still work. I don't want anyone thinking." Clara, Miguel put a hand on her shoulder. "Take the win. Go home. Your section's covered." She wanted to argue, but the exhaustion crashed over her all at once. Her wrist still ached where Ethan had grabbed it. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Maybe going home wasn't the worst idea. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." She changed out of her work shoes in the staff locker room, pulled on her worn jacket, and slipped out through the service corridor. The hotel had a maze of back hallways that the guests never saw, plain walls, fluorescent lights, the unglamorous skeleton that kept the luxury functioning. Clara was halfway to the exit when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Matteo Ricci stood at the end of the hallway, hands in his pockets, looking completely out of place in the dingy corridor. His black suit seemed to absorb the harsh overhead light. He watched her with that same unsettling intensity she'd seen in the ballroom. "Mr. Ricci," Clara's voice came out shakier than she wanted. "I thank you for what you did. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." He walked toward her slowly, each step echoing off the concrete floor. "Are you hurt?"
"No. I'm fine."
"Your wrist." She'd been unconsciously rubbing it. She dropped her hand quickly. "It's nothing. Just a little sore." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the fine details of his face, The small scar above his left eyebrow, the silver cufflinks at his wrists, the way his dark eyes seemed to miss nothing. What Royce did was unacceptable, Mateo said quietly. What he said to you is worse. I've already made sure the hotel management knows you're not at fault. I heard. Thank you, Clara shifted uncomfortably. But I should probably go. It's late and… What you said to him, Mateo's voice stopped her mid-sentence. About not hitting you. That wasn't just a figure of speech, was it? Clara's blood went cold. She'd hoped no one had caught that the words had been lost in the chaos. But of course he'd heard. He seemed like the type of man who heard everything. I don't know what you mean, she lied. Yes, you do. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Not pity. She couldn't have stood pity. Something more like recognition. Someone hurt you before. Someone made you afraid. It wasn't a question. Clara felt tears threatening again and hated herself for it. She'd spent 3 years building walls, learning to stand on her own, trying to forget. And this stranger had seen through all of it in 30 seconds. I should go, she repeated, stepping back. Wait, Mateo reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. If anyone gives you trouble, Royce or anyone else, call this number. Clara took the card automatically. Heavy stock, simple black lettering. Mateo Ricci. Ricci Enterprises. A phone number. Nothing else. I don't understand, she said. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Don't I? He tilted his head slightly, studying her. You work 2 jobs to support your family. You're putting your brother through college. You haven't taken a sick day in 18 months. You eat lunch in the stairwell because you can't afford the staff cafeteria prices. Should I go on? Clara felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. How do you? I make it my business to know things. Mateo stepped closer, and this time she didn't back away. His voice dropped to something almost gentle, though no less dangerous. Don't worry. No one touches what's mine. The words hung in the air between them. Yours, Clara whispered. I don't understand. You will. He stepped past her toward the exit, then paused and looked back. And Clara? That video of tonight? It's already been removed from every platform. As far as the internet is concerned, it never happened. How is that possible? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I told you. I know things. I fix things. He pushed open the door, letting in the cool night air. Get home safe. Then he was gone, leaving Clara standing alone in the fluorescent-lit hallway, clutching a business card and trying to understand what had just happened. For the first time in 3 years, someone had defended her in public, had made her feel protected instead of pitiful. But protection from Mateo Ricci felt less like a gift and more like a trap slowly closing around her. And the terrifying part, she wasn't sure she wanted to escape. Mateo sat alone in his penthouse office, the lights of Manhattan glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. On his computer screen, the video played for the 3rd time. He'd had Raphael scrub it from every public platform within an hour of the incident, but not before securing a private copy. Mateo always kept records. Information was currency, and you never knew when you'd need to spend it. The footage was shaky, shot on someone's phone from across the ballroom, but clear enough. He watched Clara stumble backward after the collision, watched the wine splash across Royce's tuxedo in slow motion. Watched Ethan grab her wrist with enough force to make Mateo's jaw tighten. Then came her voice, small and terrified. Please don't hit me. I'll clean it again. Mateo paused the video on her face. She looked so young in that moment, so utterly vulnerable. Her dark eyes were wide with fear, her whole body trembling like a cornered animal expecting a blow. Something twisted in his chest, an emotion he hadn't felt in years. Not quite anger, though there was plenty of that directed at Royce. Not quite pity, because Clara Rossi was stronger than she looked. He'd seen that in her eyes later in the hallway. No, this was something else. Something dangerous. Admiration. She'd been terrified, humiliated in front of hundreds of people, and yet she'd still tried to fix the situation. Still apologized. Still maintained her dignity even while begging not to be hurt. That took a kind of courage that most people in that ballroom would never understand. And that phrase, "Please don't hit me," told him everything he needed to know about her past. Someone had taught her to expect violence. Someone had made her believe she deserved it. Mateo closed the laptop with more force than necessary. He poured himself 2 fingers of scotch and walked to the windows, looking out over the city he'd spent 20 years claiming as his own. He'd built his empire on information, leverage, and knowing exactly which strings to pull. He'd learned young that power wasn't about violence, it was about control. About knowing more than everyone else in the room. About making people understand that crossing you came with consequences they couldn't afford. Ethan Royce had crossed a line tonight. Not with him. Mateo couldn't care less about some spoiled tech heir's opinion. But threatening Clara, hurting her, making her shake like that was unacceptable. Raphael had already sent over the preliminary report on the Royce family's business dealings. Mateo would read it tomorrow, find the pressure points, and squeeze until Ethan understood exactly what happened to people who touched things that belonged to Matteo Ricci. Because Clara was his now, whether she understood that yet or not. He decided at the moment she looked up at him with those frightened eyes and whispered "thank you." The moment he'd felt that unfamiliar pull in his chest that meant he'd found something rare. Something worth keeping. Mateo took a slow sip of scotch, watching his reflection in the dark glass. He'd protect her. Shield her from whatever storms were coming. Give her the security she so desperately needed. And if that made him possessive, controlling, dangerous, well, he'd never pretended to be anything else. Across town, Clara climbed the 4 flights of stairs to her apartment, her feet aching and her mind still spinning from the night's events. The building was old, with peeling paint and a permanent smell of cooking oil in the hallways, but it was affordable.
Barely.
She and her younger brother Lucas split the rent on the 1-bedroom unit, and even then, it took both their paychecks and Clara's second job at the coffee shop to make ends meet. She unlocked the door to find the apartment dark. Luca was working his night shift at the campus library. Good. She didn't want to explain why she was home early, or what had happened at the hotel. Clara dropped her bag on the couch and kicked off her shoes, finally letting herself breathe. The business card Mateo had given her was still in her pocket. She pulled it out, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. "No one touches what's mine." What did that even mean? She wasn't his. They'd barely exchanged 50 words. Yet he looked at her like she was something precious. Something he'd decided to claim. It should terrify her. After Jake, after everything, she'd promised herself she'd never let another man make decisions for her, control her, own her. But Mateo hadn't felt like Jake. Jake had been charming, manipulative, slowly cutting her off from friends and family until his anger was the only thing in her world. Mateo was something else entirely. Direct. Powerful. Dangerous in a completely different way. Her phone rang, making her jump. Unknown number. "Hello." Miss Rossi, the voice was clipped, angry. Her landlord, Mr. Patterson. "I just saw a very interesting video online before it mysteriously disappeared. Seems you caused quite a scene tonight at some fancy hotel." Clara's stomach dropped. "Mr. Patterson, I can explain." "I don't want explanations. I run a respectable building. I can't have tenants who bring drama and public humiliation to their address. What if reporters show up? What if people start associating my property with whatever that was?" "It was an accident," Clara said, hating how her voice shook. "I spilled wine on someone. That's all. It won't happen again. That's not what I saw. I saw you making a scene, getting physical with one of the richest men in the city. Do you know what kind of attention that brings?" "I didn't," he grabbed me. "I was just trying to apologize." "I don't care about the details." Mr. Patterson's voice went cold. "What I care about is that your rent is going up. 200 extra per month, starting next week. Consider it compensation for the potential headache you've caused me." 200. Clara felt dizzy. "I can't afford that." Please, Mr. Patterson. I'm sorry about tonight, but I can't. Then find somewhere else to live. You have until the end of the month to either pay the increase or vacate. Your choice. The line went dead. Clara stood in her dark apartment, phone still pressed to her ear, and felt the tears she'd been holding back all night finally break free. $200 more per month. She was already working 70-hour weeks between both jobs. There was nothing left to cut, nowhere else to save. She'd lose the apartment. She and Luca would have to move somewhere even worse, somewhere farther from his college and her work. Or maybe they'd end up back in Jersey with their aunt, sleeping on her couch, feeling like failures all over again. Clara sank onto the worn sofa and cried, for the humiliation, for the fear, for the impossible weight of trying to keep everything together when the world kept finding new ways to crush you. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she thought about the business card on the coffee table. About a man who fixed things. About how dangerous it might be to call that number. The next morning, Mateo sat across from Rafael Torres in his downtown office. Rafael had been his consigliera for 12 years, part lawyer, part investigator, part fixer. If Mateo was the face of Ricci Enterprises, Rafael was the shadow that made sure everything ran smoothly behind the scenes. Tell me about the girl, Mateo said, sliding a photo across the desk. Clara's employee ID from the hotel, printed from the file he'd already pulled. Rafael picked up the photo, his scarred eyebrow lifting slightly. The waitress from last night? I already scrubbed the video like you asked. What else do you need? Everything. Background, family, finances, associates. I want to know who she is. Boss, Rafael set down the photo carefully. With all due respect, this seems like more than just cleaning up after the Royce situation. It is. Is she in trouble? Not yet. Mateo leaned back in his chair. But I want to know if she will be. Run the full background. Quietly. Rafael studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Give me 4 hours. 2. Of course. Rafael stood, gathering his tablet. Anything specific I should focus on? Mateo thought about Clara's trembling hands, her worn jacket, the exhaustion in her eyes.
Debts.
Look for debts. Rafael returned in 90 minutes. He placed a thick folder on Mateo's desk and sat down without being invited, which meant the news was either very good or very bad. Given his expression, Mateo suspected the latter. Clara Marie Rossi, Rafael began, flipping open the folder. 26 years old. Born in Newark, raised in Jersey City. Parents died in a car accident when she was 21. Drunk driver hit them on Route 78-inch. Mateo felt something tighten in his chest. She raised her brother. Yeah. Luca Rossi, now 22. She got custody when he was 18, put him through community college. Now he's at NYU studying computer science. She works 2 jobs, the hotel and a coffee shop in the village. 70-hour weeks, like you said. Bank account is. Rafael shook his head. She's got maybe $800 total. Living paycheck to paycheck. That's not unusual for someone in her situation.
No.
But this is. Rafael pulled out another document. 3 months ago, Luca Rossi took out a private loan for $25,000. Not from a bank, from a company called Harbor Freight Solutions. Mateo went very still. Harbor Freight. You know them. I know of them. Mateo took the document, scanning the terms. They were brutal. 30% interest, payment due in full within 6 months, harsh penalties for late payment. Harbor Freight is a front. They're small-time smugglers working out of Brooklyn. They move electronics, stolen goods, whatever pays. But they also launder money for bigger operations. Your rivals, Rafael said quietly. Sometimes Mateo's mind was already racing through the connections. Harbor Freight had ties to the Volkov organization, a Russian syndicate that had been trying to muscle into his territory for years. They used legitimate-seeming businesses to trap people in debt, then leveraged that debt for various purposes, moving illegal goods, hiding money, providing alibis. Why would a college kid need $25,000? Mateo asked. Rafael pulled out another page. Gambling. Luca Rossi got in over his head playing online poker. Started small, thought he could win it back, classic spiral. By the time he realized how deep he was, he owed money to some very unpleasant people. Harbor Freight offered him a solution. One loan to cover all his debts. Manageable terms. Manageable, Matteo's voice was flat. At 30% interest with a 6-month deadline, he'd need to pay back $32,000. Where's a college student going to get that kind of money? He's not. His sister is. Raphael met Matteo's eyes. Clara's been making the payments. I pulled her credit card statements. She's been sending Harbor Freight $1,500 every 2 weeks. That's why she works 2 jobs. Why she never eats in the staff cafeteria. Why she's got $800 to her name despite working 70 hours a week. Matteo felt a cold fury building in his chest. Not at Clara or her foolish brother. At the system that had trapped them. At the predators who made their living off desperate people. How much does she still owe? $14,000. But here's the problem. Raphael pulled out one more document. The loan is due in full next month. If she doesn't pay, Harbor Freight has the right to collect through alternative means. That's code, boss. They'll use Luca for something. Probably make him move product, hide shipments, maybe worse. And Clara has no idea. I doubt it. Kids like Luca don't tell their sisters they're about to get forced into smuggling operations. Raphael closed the folder. But it gets more interesting. I did some digging on Harbor Freight's recent activities. Guess whose shipping containers they've been using to move their goods? Matteo looked up sharply. Royce Dynamics, Raphael said. Specifically, their subsidiary, Royce Global Shipping. Ethan Royce's father's company has been letting Harbor Freight use their containers to move illegal tech parts from China. They mark them as legitimate electronics, slip them through customs, then distribute them through their network. The pieces clicked into place in Matteo's mind. Harbor Freight worked for the Volkovs. The Volkovs had been trying to establish a shipping route through New York. Royce provided the legitimate cover in exchange for a cut. And somewhere in this web of criminal enterprise, Clara Rossi was caught, working herself to death to pay off a debt that was funding his enemies. They're planning something, Matteo said quietly. You don't trap a college kid in debt unless you need him for something specific. Agreed. Want me to find out what? No, Matteo stood, walking to the window. The city stretched out below him, glittering and dangerous, and his. I want you to make sure the Rossi name becomes untouchable. Quietly. Clara can't know I'm involved. Boss, if Harbor Freight is working with the Volkovs, and the Volkovs are using Royce's shipping network, this could be our opportunity to... To what? Matteo turned. Destroy them all?
Yes.
But not at the expense of an innocent woman who's already sacrificed everything for her family. Raphael was quiet for a moment. You care about her. I care about justice, Matteo corrected. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't quite true. He cared about Clara specifically, about the way she'd looked at him in that hallway, about her quiet strength, about the fact that she was trapped in his world without even knowing it. She was caught in the same web he'd spent his life weaving. And somehow, that made her his responsibility. Find out what Harbor Freight is planning with Luca, Matteo ordered. And Raphael? Make sure nothing happens to either of them. Whatever it takes. Understood. Raphael stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, boss. She's lucky you found her when you did. After Raphael left, Matteo stood at the window for a long time, thinking about Clara crying in that hallway, about her brother's debts, about the trap slowly closing around them both. He'd built his empire on knowing everyone's secrets, on leveraging information for power. He'd never felt guilty about it before. But looking out at the city now, all he could think about was a frightened waitress with kind eyes who'd been working herself to death to save a brother who was already lost. Not anymore. Matteo Ricci protected what was his. And Clara Rossi, whether she knew it yet or not, was his. 3 days passed before Matteo saw Clara again. He'd stayed away deliberately, giving Raphael time to work, letting his own unexpected obsession cool into something more manageable. But Wednesday morning found him walking through the marble lobby of the Riviera Grand Hotel with a perfectly legitimate reason for his visit. He owned 17% of the hotel's parent company. Regular inspections were part of his due diligence. The general manager, a nervous man named Thornton, rushed to greet him. "Mr. Ricci, we weren't expecting you today. If you'd called ahead, we could have." "That's why I didn't call." Matteo kept walking, his eyes scanning the lobby. "I want to see how things really run, not a show prepared for my benefit." Of course, of course. Where would you like to start? The kitchens? Conference facilities? We've just renovated the restaurant. Lunch service. Thornton blinked. The restaurant. Is there a problem?
No, no.
Right this way. The main restaurant was already being set up for the lunch rush. White tablecloths, fresh flowers, pristine silverware laid out with mathematical precision. Waitstaff moved efficiently between tables, preparing for the business crowd that would flood in around noon. And there, near the windows, Clara was folding napkins. She wore the same black skirt and white blouse uniform as the other servers, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. But Matteo would have recognized her anywhere. The delicate curve of her neck, the way she bit her lower lip while concentrating, the grace in her movements despite the exhaustion that still shadowed her eyes. She hadn't seen him yet. "Mr. Thornton," Matteo said quietly. "I'd like a few minutes alone to observe. Wait in the lobby." "But sir, if you have questions, I'll find you if I need you." Thornton hesitated, then nodded and retreated. The other staff members noticed Matteo's presence and suddenly became very busy with tasks in other parts of the restaurant. Within 30 seconds, only Clara remained, still focused on her napkins, unaware that the room had emptied around her. Matteo walked toward her table, his footsteps silent on the carpeted floor. "Doesn't it bother you," he said quietly, "that they all talk about you now?" Clara's hands stilled. She looked up slowly, and her eyes widened when she recognized him. "Mr. Ricci." "Matteo." She set down the napkin she'd been folding, straightening her spine. "I didn't know you were coming today. Mr. Thornton usually tells us when we're having a VIP inspection." "That defeats the purpose of an inspection." He gestured to the chair across from her. "May I?" "It's your restaurant," she said softly. "You can do whatever you want." True. But he found himself waiting for her permission anyway. After a moment, she nodded, and he sat her down. Up close, he could see the faint circles under her eyes, the way her uniform hung a bit looser than it should. She wasn't eating enough. Still working herself to exhaustion. "You didn't answer my question," Matteo said. "About people talking?" Clara's jaw tightened slightly. "Everyone talks. That's what people do. They whisper about the clumsy waitress who spilled wine on Ethan Royce and then got defended by." She paused.
"By you."
"Does it bother you?" "Which part? That I made a mistake in front of hundreds of people? That I embarrassed myself? Or that I became some kind of charity case?" There was an edge to her voice now, a spark of something beneath the careful politeness. Matteo leaned forward slightly, intrigued. "You're not a charity case." "Really?" Clara picked up another napkin, her fingers working automatically even as she spoke. "Because that's what it feels like. Everyone's been different since that night. Miguel gives me the best sections. Mr. Thornton approved my time-off request without any questions. Even the other servers are being nice to me now." She finally looked up at him, and her dark eyes were steady despite the emotion in her voice. "They all think I needed saving." "You did." "No," the word came out firmly, surprising them both. Clara took a breath, seeming to gather her courage. "What I needed was for that entitled rich boy to learn some manners. What I needed was not to be grabbed and threatened in front of everyone I work with. What I got was you stepping in and making it worse." Matteo felt something shift in his chest, not anger at her defiance, but something far more dangerous.
"Respect."
"How did I make it worse?" "Because now everyone sees me as the helpless girl who had to be rescued by a powerful man. They don't see that I apologized professionally. They don't see that I tried to fix the situation myself. They just see," she gestured vaguely, "weakness." I saw strength, Matteo said quietly. You were terrified, but you still tried to make it right. You still kept your dignity. Most people would have just run. Clara's hands stilled on the napkin. Then why did you interfere? Because Royce crossed a line. Because no one should speak to anyone the way he spoke to you, Matteo held her gaze. And because when you asked him not to hit you, I realized someone had taught you to expect violence. That's unacceptable.
Color rose in her cheeks.
You don't know anything about me, don't I? Something flickered in her expression, recognition, fear, or maybe both. She looked away, focusing on the napkin in her hands. You shouldn't have bothered.
I'm nobody.
That's where you're wrong, Matteo stood, buttoning his suit jacket. He'd pushed enough for one day. Any more, and she'd bolt like a frightened deer. You're not nobody, Clara. And whether you believe it or not, you didn't need saving that night. You just needed someone to even the playing field. He started to walk away, then paused and looked back. She was watching him now, confusion and something else written across her face. It only bothers me that they think I needed saving, she said quietly, repeating her earlier sentiment, but with less edge this time. Almost like she was testing how he'd respond. Matteo smiled faintly. Then prove them wrong. Keep being exactly who you are, proud, strong, stubborn. Don't let anyone make you small, Clara. Not Royce, not the whispers, not even me. He left before she could respond, finding Thornton hovering anxiously in the lobby. Everything's satisfactory, Mr. Ricci? Very. Matteo pulled out his phone as he walked toward the exit. Make sure Miss Rossi gets promoted to lead server for the main dining room. She's wasted on general floor service. Of course, sir. Right away. Outside, Matteo dialed Raphael's number. His consigliera answered on the first ring. How's our project? Matteo asked. Harbor Freight is planning something for next week. They've been calling Luca Rossi, pressuring him about the upcoming payment. I think they're going to make their move soon. Don't let them. Matteo climbed into the back of his car. Make sure her brother's safe. I don't care what it costs. Handle it quietly. Clara can't know I'm involved. Understood. And boss. What? She got to you, didn't she? The girl. Matteo thought about Clara's defiant eyes, the proud set of her shoulders, the way she'd challenged him despite knowing exactly who he was. Thought about her quiet strength and stubborn independence, qualities that made her dangerous to his carefully controlled world. Just keep her brother safe, Raphael. He ended the call and stared out the window at the Manhattan traffic. Clara didn't want to be saved. She wanted to be strong on her own terms. That made him want to protect her even more. And that, Matteo realized with uncomfortable clarity, was exactly the problem. Raphael sat in his car across from a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn, watching men load shipping containers onto flatbed trucks. He'd been surveilling Harbor Freight Solutions for 2 days now, and the pattern was becoming clear. His phone buzzed. Matteo. What do you have? His boss asked without preamble. More than I expected. Raphael adjusted his camera, snapping photos of the license plates. Harbor Freight isn't just small-time smugglers anymore. They've scaled up. The Royce connection runs deeper than we thought. Explain. Royce Global Shipping owns 12 warehouses along the Brooklyn waterfront. Harbor Freight officially rents space in 3 of them for legitimate import-export operations, but what they're really doing is using Royce's customs clearance codes to smuggle tech components from China. High-end microchips, circuit boards, components for military-grade equipment. The Volkovs, Matteo said quietly. Yeah, they're building something. Don't know what yet. But they need clean shipping routes to bring in the parts without triggering federal oversight. Royce provides the legitimate business front, Harbor Freight handles the actual smuggling, and the Volkovs supply the buyers on the other end. And Luca Rossi. Raphael pulled out his tablet, scrolling through the surveillance notes. That's where it gets interesting. I tapped the phone of Harbor Freight's operations manager, guy named Vincent Caruso. Yesterday, he had a conference call with his bosses. They're planning a major shipment arriving next Friday at the Port of New York. 50 containers marked as consumer electronics, but really carrying restricted tech worth about $20 million on the black market. That's ambitious. It's suicide if they get caught. Which is why they need a fall guy. Raphael zoomed in on a photo of Luca Rossi entering the NYU computer science building. Luca's perfect. He's a college student, no criminal record, smart enough with computers to handle the logistics, but naive enough to manipulate. They've been grooming him. Matteo's voice went cold. Grooming him how? The loan wasn't random. 3 months ago, Harbor Freight identified Luca through his online gambling. They saw a desperate kid with a clean record and IT skills. They encouraged his gambling, let his debts pile up, then swooped in with this solution. Now they own him. What's their plan? Raphael checked his notes. Next Friday, Luca will receive instructions to hack into Royce Global's customs database and alter the manifests for those 50 containers. Make it look like they passed all the inspections. He'll think he's just doing a simple favor to clear his debt. He won't realize he's committing federal customs fraud. And when a shipment gets discovered, if it gets discovered, Luca's digital fingerprints are all over the hack. He goes to prison for 20 years. Harbor Freight and the Volkovs walk away clean. If it doesn't get discovered, they've got leverage on him forever. Either way, they win. Matteo was silent for a long moment. Raphael could practically hear him thinking through the implications. What about Clara? Matteo finally asked. She has no idea. Luca's been lying to her about where the money's going. She thinks she's paying down a legitimate student loan. Raphael paused. Boss, if we expose this operation, we take down Harbor Freight, damage the Volkov supply chain, and implicate Royce Global in federal smuggling charges. It's everything we've been working toward. But Luca Rossi becomes a witness in a federal case. Protective custody, testimony, his whole life blown apart. And Clara, Raphael sighed. She'll know what her brother did. What she's been working 70-hour weeks to enable. Another silence.
Rafael Watif.
He'd worked with Matteo long enough to know when his boss was weighing options, calculating costs, deciding how much he was willing to sacrifice for a strategic victory. There's another way, Matteo said finally. I'm listening. We intercept the shipment before Luca gets involved. Make it look like the Volkovs betrayed Royce, or vice versa. Create enough chaos that Harbor Freight's operation falls apart from the inside. That's messy. And dangerous. Less dangerous than letting a civilian college kid become collateral damage. Matteo's voice hardened. Find out exactly when and where Harbor Freight plans to contact Luca. I want eyes on him 24 hours before that happens. If anyone approaches him, we move first. Raphael made notes on his tablet. What about the debt? Even if we stop the shipment, Luca still owes Harbor Freight $14,000. They'll just find another way to leverage him. No, they won't. Because the debt is going to disappear. Boss, I know what you're going to say. That it'll look suspicious. That Clara will ask questions. I don't care. Matteo's tone left no room for argument. Make the debt vanish, Raphael. I want it erased from every database, every record, every piece of paper. As far as Harbor Freight is concerned, Luca Rossi never existed. That kind of deep scrubbing takes resources.
Money.
We're talking about falsifying financial records, bribing officials. I don't care what it takes. Do it. Raphael nodded slowly, even though Matteo couldn't see him. You're declaring war. On the Volkovs, on Royce, on everyone connected to this operation. All to protect one girl and her idiot brother. I'm protecting an innocent woman from being destroyed by a world she didn't choose to enter, Matteo corrected. The fact that it gives me an excuse to destroy my enemies is just convenient. Is it convenient? Raphael asked carefully. Or is this about something else? Does it matter?
Yeah, boss.
It does. Because if you're doing this for strategic reasons, that's business. But if you're doing this because you care about Clara Rossi, Raphael chose his words carefully. That makes you vulnerable. And vulnerable people make mistakes. I'm not vulnerable. But even Raphael could hear the lie in that statement. He'd seen Matteo operate for 12 years. Cold, calculated, always 3 steps ahead. The man didn't make emotional decisions. He didn't put empires at risk for strangers.
Until now.
I'll handle the debt, Raphael said finally. And I'll monitor Luca. But Matteo? When this goes sideways, and it will go sideways, you need to be ready for the fallout. It won't. It always does. Especially when you're fighting someone else's battle. Matteo ended the call without responding. Raphael sat in his car, watching the warehouse, and wondered if his boss understood what he'd just committed to. This wasn't just about helping Clara anymore. This wasn't kindness or charity or even justice. This was war. And Matteo Ricci had just painted a target on his back for a woman who didn't even know she was the reason for it. Raphael pulled out his phone and started making calls. If his boss wanted to burn down the Volkov's operation and take Royce Global Shipping down in the process, then Raphael would make sure the fire burned hot enough to leave nothing but ashes. But he couldn't shake the feeling that when the smoke cleared, Matteo himself might be standing in the wreckage. Some women, Raphael thought, were worth dying for. He just hoped Clara Rossi was worth what Matteo was about to risk.
Thursday evening.
Clara's shift at the hotel had run 2 hours over because of a last-minute corporate event. By the time she changed out of her uniform and stepped outside, the October rain was coming down in sheets. She stood under the hotel's narrow awning, watching water stream off the edge, and calculated. The bus stop was 3 blocks away. Her apartment was another 40 minutes after that. She had her coffee shop shift in the morning at 6. If she got home by 11, she'd have maybe 6 hours of sleep. If she didn't get pneumonia first. Clara took a breath, pulled her thin jacket tighter, and stepped into the rain. She made it half a block before she heard the car. A black Mercedes pulled up beside her, moving slowly to match her pace. The passenger window rolled down, and Matteo Ricci looked out at her with an expression that was equal parts amused and exasperated.
Get in, he said.
I'm fine, Clara called back, still walking. Rain plastered her hair to her face. The bus stop is just 3 blocks away. I know. And you'll be soaked by the time you get there. Then you'll wait 20 minutes in wet clothes, then ride 40 minutes home while shivering. He reached across and opened the passenger door from inside. Get in, Clara. She stopped walking. Water ran into her eyes. Every practical bone in her body screamed that getting into a car with Matteo Ricci, a man she barely knew, a man who'd made it clear he considered her his in some undefined, terrifying way, was a terrible idea. But it was raining.
She was exhausted.
And something about the way he looked at her made her feel safe even when her instincts said she shouldn't. Clara got in the car. The interior was warm, leather seats soft beneath her. Classical music played quietly from the speakers, something with piano that she didn't recognize. Matteo pulled back into traffic without comment, and Clara realized he was waiting for her to give him her address. I live in Alphabet City, she said quietly. Avenues C and 8th. He nodded, turning at the next light. They drove in silence for a few blocks, and Clara became acutely aware of how out of place she looked, dripping wet in her cheap jacket, smelling like hotel kitchens and exhaustion, sitting in a car that probably cost more than she'd make in 5 years. You shouldn't be walking home this late, Matteo said finally. I don't have much choice. The hotel's on 57th. My apartment is downtown. Public transit is what I can afford. That's not safe. Clara almost laughed. Most of my life isn't safe, Mr. Ricci. That's just how things are. Matteo, he corrected, glancing at her. And it doesn't have to be that way. Doesn't it? The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the rain. Maybe it was 3 years of barely keeping her head above water while the world kept trying to drown her. You live in a different world than I do. You probably don't even remember the last time you rode a city bus or worried about making rent. You're right, he said simply. I don't. But that doesn't mean I don't understand struggle. Something in his tone made her look at him. Really look at him. In the dim light of the car, his profile was sharp and strong, but there was something else there. Something that suggested Matteo Ricci hadn't always been the powerful man behind the wheel of a Mercedes. How did you, Clara stopped herself. It wasn't her business. Never mind. How did I get here? He smiled faintly. You can ask. I built my first business when I was 19, buying foreclosed properties and flipping them. Not glamorous. I learned young that information is power, that knowing what other people need gives you leverage. I was good at it. And now you own half of Manhattan. Some of it he turned onto Houston Street, heading east. The rest I'm still working on. Despite everything, Clara felt her lips twitch into an almost smile. Then reality crashed back in, and the smile faded. My brother owes money, she heard herself say. The words tumbled out before she could stop them, pulled out by exhaustion and the strange safety of the dark car and this man who seemed to see through all her defenses. A lot of money. To some very bad people. Mateo's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. How much?
$14,000.
He took out a loan for gambling debts. He was stupid and desperate, and her voice cracked. He's 22. He made a mistake. But I'm the one paying for it now. Literally. That's why I work 2 jobs. That's why I can't afford to eat in the staff cafeteria or take sick days or... She pressed her hands to her face.
I'm sorry.
You don't need to hear this. How long do you have? The loan is due next month. If I can get a few more months, maybe I can.
No.
Clara looked at him sharply. What? Mateo pulled over to the curb in front of her building, putting the car in park. He turned to face her fully, and his dark eyes were intense in the streetlight filtering through the rain. You won't have to pay, he said quietly. But don't ask me how. Clara's heart started pounding. What does that mean? It means your brother's debt will be cleared.
Soon.
And you don't need to know anything more than that. I don't understand. You can't just... Then it hit her. The power, the influence, the way people looked at him with fear and respect. The way he'd made a viral video disappear overnight. Oh my God. What are you? Someone who helps people I care about, Mateo said simply. By doing what? Threatening people? Hurting them? Clara felt panic rising in her chest. I don't want anyone hurt because of me. I don't want. Clara, he reached out and gently took her hand. His fingers were warm, steady, anchoring. Look at me.
She did.
His eyes were calm, but beneath that calm was something steel-hard and absolutely immovable. No one will be hurt, he said. But your brother's debt will disappear. You'll be free of it. That's all you need to know.
Why?
Clara whispered. Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me. Don't I? He smiled faintly, echoing his words from their last meeting. Then his expression softened slightly. You're a good person, Clara. You work yourself to exhaustion for your brother. You apologize even when you're the one being hurt. You stay proud even when the world tries to make you small. People like you are rare, his thumb brushed over her knuckles. I protect rare things. Clara felt tears threatening. You scare me. Good, Mateo released her hand, but his gaze didn't waver. That means you still have sense. I am scary, Clara. I do things most people can't even imagine. But I've never hurt anyone who didn't deserve it. And I would never, ever let anyone hurt you. The last part sounded less like a promise and more like a threat to the entire world. Clara opened the car door, needing distance, needing to think. But she paused before getting out, looking back at him. I don't know if I should thank you or run from you. Both would be smart, Mateo said. But I hope you choose the first. Clara stepped out into the rain, which had softened to a drizzle. She stood there for a moment, watching him watch her through the window. Then she leaned down. Mateo? Yes. My brother can know. Whatever you do, he can never know I told you or that you helped.
He's proud.
Stupid, but proud. It would destroy him. Mateo nodded slowly. He'll never know. You have my word. Clara wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that this powerful, dangerous man who'd claimed her as his without permission was actually the white knight he seemed to be. But as she watched him drive away, disappearing into the Manhattan night, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a deal with the devil. And the terrifying part was how much she hoped he'd keep his promise. That same night, while Clara slept in her small apartment, Matteo's men moved through Brooklyn like shadows. Raphael had assembled a team of 6 professionals who'd worked for Matteo for years, who understood that discretion was more valuable than violence. They wore dark clothes, no identifying marks, and carried weapons they hoped they wouldn't need to use. The Harbor Freight warehouse was tucked between 2 legitimate shipping companies on a quiet stretch of the Red Hook waterfront. At 2 in the morning, only 2 guards were on duty, both smoking cigarettes by the loading dock. Raphael's team disabled the security cameras first, a simple remote hack that made the footage loop on a 10-minute delay. Then they moved. Inside the warehouse, Vincent Caruso sat in his makeshift office, counting cash from the week's operations. He was a thick man with greedy eyes, the kind who'd sell his mother if the price was right. Next to him, another man Raphael recognized from surveillance photos, Anton Volkov's lieutenant. They were discussing the upcoming shipment. Luca Rossi's name came up 3 times. Raphael nodded to his team. They moved silently, professionally. Within 30 seconds, both men were on the floor, hands zip-tied behind their backs, guns pressed to their heads. "Don't move. Don't speak." Raphael crouched in front of Caruso. "I'm only going to say this once. The Rossi debt? It's gone. You're going to erase every record, every file, every piece of paper that says Luca Rossi owes you money. You're going to forget you ever heard his name." Caruso's eyes widened. "Do you know who you're?" Raphael pressed his gun against the man's temple. "I know exactly who you work for. I also know that if you ever contact the Rossis again, if you even drive past their apartment building, I'll make sure the Volkovs find out you've been skimming 20% off every shipment for the past 6 months. The color drained from Caruso's face. "That's not, I haven't. I have bank statements that say otherwise. Documents with your signature. Video of you moving cash into offshore accounts." Raphael smiled coldly. "Want me to send them to Anton? Or would you rather just forget the Rossi family exists?" Caruso swallowed hard. "The debt's cleared." "Good choice." Raphael stood, nodding to his team. They pulled Caruso to his computer, made him delete every file related to Luca Rossi, then had him sign documents stating the debt had been paid in full. One of Raphael's men copied the hard drive, ensuring they'd have proof if Caruso ever tried to renege. The Volkov lieutenant started to protest, but Raphael cut him off with a look. "Tell your boss the Ricci territory is off limits. That includes anyone with the last name Rossi. Consider this your only warning." They were out of the warehouse in 12 minutes, leaving Caruso and the lieutenant tied up for the guards to find. By the time anyone called the police, Raphael's team was gone, and all evidence of their presence had been erased. Raphael called Matteo from the car. "It's done. The debt's cleared, the records are destroyed, and Harbor Freight understands that touching the Rossis would be a fatal mistake. Any complications?" "None." Caruso cooperated once he understood the alternative. The Volkov lieutenant looked like he wanted to argue, but he'll deliver the message. "And Luca?" "Safe. He never knew we were there." Raphael paused. "Boss, the shipment's still coming on Friday. Harbor Freight will need a new fall guy. Let them scramble. Without the Rossi connection, they'll have to find someone else or delay. Either way, we've bought time." Matteo's voice was satisfied. "Send the letter to Clara tomorrow. Make it look official. Already prepared. She'll have it by noon." Friday morning, Clara was pulling on her coffee shop uniform when she heard the mail slot clink.
Bills, probably.
More demands for money she didn't have. She almost didn't check it. But something made her walk to the door, made her pick up the single envelope lying on the worn carpet. It was official-looking, thick paper, typed address, no return information. Clara's hands shook as she opened it. "Dear Ms. Rossi, this letter serves as official notification that the loan account #HF47832 in the name of Luca Rossi has been paid in full as of October 16, 2025. The outstanding balance of $14,24700 has been satisfied. No further payments are required. All records of this debt have been cleared from our systems. Please consider this matter permanently closed.
Arbor frekte solution.
Clara read it 3 times. Then 4. Her vision blurred with tears she didn't try to stop. Paid in full.
$14,000. Just. Gone.
It didn't make sense. She'd only made the last payment 2 weeks ago. There was no way, unless Luca had somehow found the money. But he was barely making minimum wage at the library. He couldn't have. A clerical error. It had to be. Some computer glitch, some mistake in their system. But the letter looked legitimate. Official letterhead, signature, account number. Everything. Clara sank onto the couch, clutching the paper like it might disappear if she let go. For the first time in 3 months, she felt like she could breathe. The crushing weight that had been sitting on her chest, the panic of calculations, the constant fear, the exhaustion of working herself to death for a debt that never seemed to shrink, all of it lifted. She started to cry. Real, ugly, relieved sobs that shook her whole body. They were free. Luca was free. She wouldn't have to work 70-hour weeks anymore. She could sleep. She could eat actual meals. She could stop living on the razor edge of disaster. Outside her building, Matteo sat in his car, watching her window. He couldn't see her from this angle, but he could imagine her face, the shock, the disbelief, the slow dawning of relief. Raphael had sent him a photo 30 minutes ago, Clara's hand reaching through the mail slot, grabbing the envelope. Matteo had been sitting here since dawn, waiting to see if she'd go to work or stay home, waiting to gauge her reaction from a distance. He told himself he was being thorough, making sure the plan had worked, ensuring she was safe. But the truth was simpler and more dangerous. He just wanted to be near her, even if she didn't know he was there. His phone buzzed.
Raphael.
She's crying. Happy tears, I think. The tracker on her phone shows she's still home. Matteo smiled faintly.
Good.
She deserved a morning off. Deserved to feel relief instead of constant pressure. Stay on, Luca, he texted back. Harbor Freight might still try something. Already on it. The kids at class. 3 of our people watching. Matteo started the engine. He should leave, get back to his office, handle the dozen other crises that always demanded his attention. But for another minute, he sat there, looking up at Clara's window, and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in years. Satisfaction. Not from a business deal or a strategic victory. From making someone happy. From protecting someone who mattered. From keeping his promise to a woman who was slowly becoming the most dangerous thing in his carefully controlled world. Then he pulled away from the curb and disappeared into morning traffic, leaving Clara alone with her relief and her mysterious second chance. She'd never know it was him. And that, Matteo told himself, was exactly how it should be. Even if part of him wanted nothing more than to see the gratitude in her eyes when she realized who'd saved her. 10 days passed. Clara noticed the difference immediately, waking up without the crushing weight of impossible debt, eating lunch without calculating every dollar, sleeping through the night for the first time in months. She'd even cut back to 50 hours a week, keeping only her hotel job and dropping the coffee shop shifts. Luca had been confused by the letter, suspicious even. This doesn't just happen, Clara. Debts don't disappear. Maybe their system crashed. Maybe they wrote it off for tax purposes. I don't know, and I don't care. She'd thrown the letter away, terrified that examining it too closely would somehow make it untrue. We're free. Let's just be grateful. But late at night, when she couldn't sleep, Clara thought about Matteo Ricci sitting in his car, promising her the debt would vanish,
telling her not to ask how.
And she wondered. The annual Mayor's Arts Foundation Gala was one of the hotel's biggest events. 500 guests, seated dinner, live orchestra. Clara had been promoted to lead server for the main dining room, which meant she supervised her section and handled the VIP tables personally. She was reviewing the seating chart when Mr. Thornton appeared at her elbow, slightly flustered. Clara, change of plans. Mr. Ricci specifically requested you for his table tonight. Her heart skipped. Mr. Ricci is here? Table 12. Private corner, just him and 2 business associates. He asked for you by name. Thornton gave her an approving nod. Looks like your professionalism during that Royce incident made an impression. Don't mess this up. Clara smoothed her uniform, checking her reflection in a polished serving tray. She looked different than she had 2 weeks ago, less exhausted, more present. The dark circles under her eyes had faded. She stood straighter. She felt braver. Table 12 was tucked in an alcove with a view of the glittering ballroom but enough privacy for quiet conversation. Matteo sat with his back to the wall. She noticed he always positioned himself to see the entire room, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He looked up as she approached, and something flickered in his dark eyes. Recognition. Appreciation. Something else she couldn't quite name. Good evening, Mr. Ricci. Clara kept her voice professional. I'll be serving your table tonight. Clara, he said her name like it was something valuable. I was hoping they'd assign you. His companions, 2 older men in expensive suits, glanced between them with interest. Matteo introduced them as investors from Chicago, but Clara barely registered their names. She could feel his attention on her like heat. Can I start you with drinks? She asked, pulling out her notepad. They ordered scotch for the businessmen, sparkling water for Matteo. As Clara turned to leave, she heard one of the men chuckle. That's the girl from the video, isn't it? The one who dumped wine on Ethan Royce. She didn't dump it, Matteo said quietly. Royce walked into her. There's a difference. Clara's cheeks burned, but she kept walking. Of course they'd seen the video before Matteo had it scrubbed. Of course they'd talk about her humiliation over their $1,000-a-plate dinners. But when she returned with drinks, Matteo caught her eye and gave her a barely perceptible shake of his head. Don't let them see it bother you. So she didn't. Throughout the dinner service, Clara moved between tables with practiced efficiency, but she was always aware of table 12. Aware of Matteo watching her, tracking her movements with those dark, intense eyes. When she brought their entrees, one of the businessmen knocked over his water glass. Clara moved instantly, catching it before more than a few drops spilled, blotting the table with a napkin. The man looked embarrassed. I'm so sorry. No harm done, sir, Clara smiled, replacing his water smoothly. Happens all the time. She felt Matteo's gaze on her as she worked, felt him notice that her hands didn't shake, that she handled the small crisis with calm competence instead of panic. As the dinner plates were cleared and dessert menus distributed, the 2 businessmen excused themselves to network in the ballroom. Clara approached to refill Matteo's water. You didn't flinch tonight, he said quietly. Clara looked up from pouring. He was studying her with that unsettling intensity, like he could see past all her defenses to whatever truth lay underneath. I'm trying to be braver, she said. You already were, his voice was soft, but there was certainty in it. You were always brave, Clara. You just didn't know it. Something warm spread through her chest. She set down the water pitcher, meeting his eyes. Things have been better lately. Easier. Good. The strangest thing happened. My brother's debt. It just disappeared. Paid in full. Out of nowhere. She watched him carefully. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Matteo's expression didn't change. Would it matter if I did?
Yes.
No, Clara glanced around, making sure no one was close enough to hear. I don't know. I'm grateful, but I'm also terrified. Because if you did that for me, then I owe you. And I don't know what someone like you expects in return. Someone like me, Matteo repeated, something sharp in his voice. Powerful. Dangerous. The kind of man who can make debts disappear and videos vanish, and she stopped herself. I don't even know what you really do, Matteo. What you're involved in. Does it matter? Shouldn't it? He was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the stem of his water glass. When he looked up at her, his dark eyes were honest in a way that made her breath catch. I've never lied to you, Clara. I won't start now. Yes, I'm dangerous. Yes, I have power that I use in ways most people wouldn't approve of. But I've never hurt anyone who didn't deserve it, and I would never hurt you. He leaned forward slightly. If I helped with your brother's debt, I did it because you were suffering and I had the ability to stop it. That's all.
No strings.
No expectations. That's not how the world works. It's how my world works when it comes to you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Clara felt her pulse quicken. Around them, the gala continued. Music, laughter, the soft clink of crystal and silverware. But in their small corner of the ballroom, everything else faded. I should get back to work, Clara whispered, even though she didn't move. You should, Matteo agreed. But his eyes never left hers. This, whatever this is, it's complicated. Yes. You're one of the wealthiest men in Manhattan. I'm a waitress who lives in a fourth-floor walk-up. I know. People would talk. They'd say terrible things. Let them. Clara shook her head, feeling tears prick behind her eyes. I can't be what you want me to be, Matteo. I'm not. I don't belong in your world. He reached across the table then, his fingers barely brushing hers. The touch was electric. You're exactly what I want you to be, he said quietly. And you belong wherever you choose to stand. The businessmen were returning, laughing about something. Clara pulled her hand back, stepping into her professional role like armor. Enjoy your dessert, gentlemen, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. As she walked away, she felt Matteo's eyes following her across the ballroom. And she knew, they both knew, that they'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The question was whether they'd survive. What came next? William Royce was not a man who forgot slights. The viral humiliation of his son at the charity auction, even though the video had been scrubbed, had spread through Manhattan's elite circles like wildfire. Everyone knew Ethan had been put in his place by Matteo Ricci. Everyone had seen the fear in the boy's eyes. It made the Royce family look weak. And weakness, in William's world, was unforgivable. He sat in his corner office at Royce Dynamics headquarters, overlooking the East River, and reviewed the dossier his lawyers had prepared. Matteo Ricci's business empire was vast, but not impenetrable. There were pressure points. The shipping subsidiary, William told his chief counsel.
Ricci Maritime Holdings.
They handle 40% of his commercial shipping contracts through the Port of New York. What about it? Buy it. William's smile was cold. Not all of it, he'd never allow that. But acquire enough shares to have board influence. Then start freezing permits, delaying inspections, creating regulatory nightmares. Make it impossible for him to operate efficiently. That's aggressive. And expensive. I don't care about the cost. I care about sending a message. William leaned back in his leather chair. Matteo Ricci humiliated my son in public. He needs to understand that the Royce family doesn't accept disrespect. Within 48 hours, Royce Dynamics had acquired 12% of Ricci Maritime Holdings through shell companies and proxy buyers. They immediately leveraged that position to demand audits, environmental reviews, and safety inspections that tied up 3 of Matteo's largest shipping contracts. The message was clear: corporate war. Matteo received the news from Raphael while reviewing contracts in his office. Royce just froze your permits for the Singapore route, Raphael said, setting down a tablet with the documentation. He's using environmental compliance as leverage. Says there are irregularities that need investigating. It'll take months to sort out. Months I don't have. Matteo's jaw tightened. That route handles $30 million in quarterly revenue. He knows. This isn't business, it's revenge. William Royce wants you to feel what it's like to be humiliated in front of people who matter. Because I defended a waitress from a spoiled son. Because you made the Royce family look weak, Raphael corrected. In his world, that's a declaration of war. Matteo was silent for a long moment, his mind working through strategies and countermoves. He could fight this legally, challenge the permits, tie Royce up in litigation. But that was slow, expensive, and uncertain. Or he could do what he did best: find leverage and use it. The Harbor Freight investigation, Matteo said quietly. The illegal tech shipments. They were using Royce Global Shipping's containers. Raphael's eyes sharpened. You want to expose him? I want to bury him. Matteo stood, walking to the window. What evidence do we have? Everything. Shipping manifests with forged customs stamps. Video surveillance of Harbor Freight loading restricted tech components into containers marked with Royce Global logos. Bank records showing payments from Volkov front companies to Royce subsidiaries. Raphael pulled up files on his tablet. It's all there. We gathered it to protect Luca Rossi, but it also proves that William Royce has been facilitating illegal smuggling operations for at least 18 months. Matteo smiled without humor. Poetic, isn't it? The information I collected to save Clara's brother is the same information that will destroy her enemy. If we do this, there's no going back. You'll be making very powerful enemies. The Volkovs will know we exposed them. Royce will. Royce will be too busy defending himself against federal charges to worry about me. Matteo turned from the window. Send everything to the FBI. Anonymously. Make sure it looks like a whistleblower from inside Royce Global. The company will collapse. 20,000 employees, suppliers, subsidiary businesses. Innocent people don't use their shipping networks to smuggle military-grade electronics for Russian crime syndicates, Matteo said coldly. William Royce made his choice when he decided to play with criminals. The employees can find new jobs. The subsidiaries can be sold. But Royce himself? He'll be lucky if he avoids federal prison.
Raphael nodded slowly.
I'll handle it. But Matteo, Clara will see the news. She'll know Royce Dynamics is being investigated for the same smuggling network that trapped her brother.
She's smart.
She'll put it together. Let her. Matteo's expression softened slightly. Maybe it's time she understood exactly what I'm capable of. What I'm willing to do to protect what's mine. 3 days later, the story broke. The New York Times ran it first. Federal investigation launched into Royce Dynamics for alleged customs fraud and illegal tech smuggling. By noon, every major outlet had picked it up. By evening, Royce Dynamics stock had dropped 40%. The FBI had raided 3 Royce Global Shipping warehouses in Brooklyn. Agents had seized containers, computers, financial records. Whistleblower documents had revealed a pattern of forged customs forms, illegal shipments from China, and payments from suspicious overseas accounts. William Royce appeared on the courthouse steps, his lawyers flanking him, denying everything. But the evidence was overwhelming. Ethan Royce, shown in a candid photo looking pale and frightened, had been questioned for 6 hours about his knowledge of the family business operations. Clara saw the headlines on her phone during her break at the hotel. She stood in the stairwell, her usual quiet place, and read the articles with growing shock. Royce Global Shipping.
Arbor Frecht Solution.
Illegal tech components. Smuggling networks. The same Harbor Freight that had given Luca the loan. The same smuggling operation that would have trapped her brother if the debt hadn't mysteriously disappeared. The same Royce family whose son had grabbed her wrist and threatened her. And now they were being destroyed by an anonymous whistleblower with evidence so detailed, so perfectly documented, that it had to have come from someone with resources and access far beyond what any normal person could obtain. Clara's hands trembled as she dialed a number she'd memorized but never called. Matteo answered on the second ring. Clara, did you do this? Her voice shook. The Royce investigation. The evidence. Did you? Does it matter?
Yes.
Matteo, they're saying William Royce might go to prison. His company is collapsing. 20,000 people might lose their jobs because William Royce was facilitating smuggling operations that fund organized crime. Matteo interrupted quietly. Because he was using his legitimate business to move illegal goods for Russian syndicates. Because he attacked my business as revenge for me defending you, he paused. And yes, because the same network that destroyed his company is the network that tried to trap your brother. Clara closed her eyes. You did this for me. I did this for justice. The fact that it protects you is just convenient. That's not true. No, Matteo admitted. It's not. I did this because William Royce hurt what's mine. And I don't allow that. I'm not yours, Clara whispered. But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Aren't you? His voice was soft, dangerous, certain. Tell me, Clara, when you saw the news, who did you think of first? Who did you call? She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. That's what I thought, Matteo said gently. Go home.
Get some rest.
This will blow over in a few days. And you? What happens to you? Nothing. I'm just a concerned citizen who had nothing to do with this unfortunate investigation. Matteo. I told you, Clara. I protect what's mine. Even if you're not ready to admit what that means yet. He hung up. Clara stood in the stairwell, her phone still pressed to her ear, and tried to understand what she was feeling. Horror at the destruction Matteo had casually unleashed. Gratitude that he'd eliminated the people who'd threatened her brother. Fear of his power. And underneath all of it, warming her from the inside out, the dangerous, terrifying knowledge that she was falling for a man who could destroy empires with a phone call. A man who'd just proven he'd burn down the world to keep her safe. A week after the Royce scandal broke, Clara was setting up for lunch service when she overheard the conversation that changed everything. She'd gone to the storage room for extra linens, a cramped space behind the main kitchen where the hotel kept supplies. The door was slightly ajar, and voices drifted through from the hallway beyond. Told you it was handled, Rafael Torres. She recognized his voice from the few times he'd accompanied Matteo to the hotel. The debt's been cleared for 2 weeks now. No one's going to connect it to the boss. I'm just saying, if anyone looks into the Rossi situation, another man's voice, unfamiliar. They won't. We scrubbed everything. As far as Harbor Freight's records show, Luca Rossi paid off the loan himself. There's no paper trail leading back to Mr. Ricci. Clara's hands froze on the stack of tablecloths. The girl still doesn't know? The other man asked.
No.
And the boss wants it that way. He was very clear. Clara Rossi can never find out he was the anonymous donor who cleared her brother's debt. She's got too much pride. She'd push him away if she knew. 25 grand to help some waitress he barely knows. The boss must really. Watch what you say. Raphael's voice went hard. She's not some waitress, and if you value your job, you'll remember that. Their footsteps moved away, leaving Clara standing alone in the storage room, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Anonymous donor. $25,000. Her brother's debt. Matteo. She'd suspected, of course. Had wondered after that conversation in his car, after the mysterious letter. But hearing it confirmed, hearing the actual words, made it real in a way that stole the breath from her lungs. He'd lied to her. Not directly, but by omission. Had looked her in the eyes and let her believe it was a clerical error, a stroke of luck, anything but what it really was. A rich man buying control over her life. Clara set down the linens with shaking hands and pulled out her phone. She found Matteo's number, the one from the business card she'd saved, and typed before she could second-guess herself. I need to see you.
Now.
His response came within seconds. My office. 30 minutes. Ricci Enterprises occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Midtown. Clara had never been inside, had never imagined she'd have reason to enter this world of marble lobbies and private elevators and receptionists who looked at her worn coat with barely concealed disdain. But anger carried her through the lobby, into the elevator, up to the 32nd floor. Raphael was waiting when the doors opened. His expression was carefully neutral, but she saw the flicker of understanding in his eyes. He knew she'd heard. Ms. Rossi. This way. He led her down a hallway lined with expensive art to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Matteo stood at those windows, hands in his pockets, looking out at Manhattan like a king surveying his kingdom. He turned when she entered, and whatever he saw in her face made his expression shift. Clara. You paid off Luca's debt, her voice shook. It wasn't a clerical error. It wasn't luck. It was you. Matteo dismissed Raphael with a slight nod. The door clicked shut, leaving them alone. Yes, he said simply. $25,000. You just wrote a check and made it disappear. Not exactly. It was more complicated than. I don't care about the details. Clara's voice rose. You lied to me. You let me think. God, I stood in that hallway and thanked you for your advice, for your comfort, and the whole time you'd already solved the problem. You'd already taken control of my life, without asking. I helped you, Matteo said quietly. There's a difference. Is there? Clara laughed, a bitter sound. You think helping me gives you the right to own my life? To make decisions about what I know and don't know? To manipulate situations behind my back? That's not what this was. Then what was it? She took a step closer, anger burning through her fear. Why did you do it, Matteo? Why go to all that trouble for someone you barely know? He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but certain. Because you're the only person I've seen stand up in a room full of power and still keep her grace. Clara blinked. What? That night at the auction, Matteo moved toward her slowly, like approaching something wild that might bolt. You were terrified, humiliated. Everyone was watching you fall apart. But you still apologized. Still tried to fix the problem. Still held on to your dignity, even when that entitled rich boy tried to take it from you. He stopped a few feet away. I've spent 20 years in rooms full of powerful people, Clara. And I've never seen anyone as strong as you were in that moment. So you decided to save me?
No.
I decided you deserved someone in your corner. Someone who could even the odds. His dark eyes held hers. You were drowning, working yourself to death for a debt that wasn't even yours. I had the ability to stop that. Why wouldn't I? Because I didn't ask you to. Because it wasn't your choice to make. You're right, the admission surprised her. I should have told you. Should have given you the choice. But Clara, if I told you I wanted to pay off your brother's debt, would you have let me? She opened her mouth to say yes, then closed it. Because the truth was she wouldn't have. Her pride would never have allowed it. That's what I thought, Matteo said gently. Tears burned behind Clara's eyes. You can't control everything. You can't fix my life without permission and expect me to be grateful. I don't expect gratitude. I never did. Then what do you expect? Nothing. He stepped closer still, and she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy. I expect nothing from you, Clara.
No repaymente, no obrigação, no debt.
I helped because I wanted to, because seeing you suffer was unacceptable to me. That's all. That's not all, her voice dropped to a whisper. You said I was yours. You said no one touches what's yours. That's not help, Matteo. That's possession. Yes, he admitted. It is. And I won't apologize for it. From the moment you looked up at me with those frightened eyes and still tried to stay strong, you became mine. Whether you accept that or not. Silence filled the office. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, Clara felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. You scare me, she finally whispered. Matteo smiled faintly, something sad and knowing in his expression. Good. That means you still have sense. I should walk out that door. I should tell you to stay away from me and my brother. I should. But you won't. Why not? Because deep down you know the truth. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her cheek with impossible gentleness. You're tired of being alone. Tired of fighting every battle by yourself. And as terrifying as I am, as wrong as this probably is, part of you wants to lean on someone who's strong enough to carry the weight. Clara closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek. This is insane. Yes. You're dangerous. Yes. I can't trust you. You can. His thumb caught the tear, wiping it away. I've never lied to you about what I am, Clara.
I'm ruthless. I'm possessive.
I do terrible things to protect what's mine. But I have never and will never hurt you. That's the one thing you can trust absolutely. She opened her eyes and found him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. And God help her, she believed him. I don't know if that's enough, she whispered. It will be, Mateo stepped back, releasing her. Take whatever time you need.
Think about what you want.
But Clara? He held her gaze. Whatever you decide, you're still mine. That doesn't change. She should argue. Should tell him he was wrong, that she belonged to herself, that no one owned her. But the words wouldn't come. Because standing in his office, feeling the weight of his protection and possession wrapped around her like armor, Clara couldn't deny the truth. She'd already fallen for the dangerous man who decided she was worth burning the world for. The only question was whether she was brave enough to admit it. 6 weeks later, the financial world watched Royce Dynamics complete its spectacular collapse. The federal investigation had uncovered a web of illegal operations far deeper than anyone expected. William Royce was indicted on 17 counts of customs fraud, conspiracy to smuggle restricted technology, and money laundering. His legal team was already negotiating a plea deal that would likely send him to federal prison for 12 years. Ethan Royce, facing his own charges as a complicit board member, had fled to Monaco. The tabloids loved it. The privileged tech heir running from justice, his empire crumbling, his arrogance finally meeting consequences. But the real story, the one buried in the business pages, was the systematic dismantling of Royce's holdings. The shipping subsidiary was sold to creditors. The tech patents went to competitors. The commercial real estate portfolio was broken up and auctioned. And the hotel chain, 6 properties across Manhattan, including the flagship Riviera Grand, was acquired by a shell company called Meridian Holdings LLC for 40% below market value. Meridian Holdings was owned by 3 other shell companies, which were ultimately controlled by Ricci Enterprises. Clara found out when Mr. Thornton called an emergency staff meeting. As you've all heard, Royce Dynamics has sold the hotel chain as part of their bankruptcy proceedings, Thornton announced to the assembled staff. The new ownership group has already made several decisions about operations going forward. Clara stood in the back of the room, her arms crossed. She'd been avoiding Mateo for weeks, not returning his calls, not accepting his dinner invitations. She needed space to think, to figure out what she wanted without his overwhelming presence clouding her judgment. But somehow, she already knew what Thornton was about to say. Effective immediately, Clara Rossi has been promoted to general manager of the Riviera Grand, Thornton continued. Several heads turned to stare at her. She'll oversee all operations, staffing, and strategic planning for the flagship location. The new ownership believes her dedication and leadership make her the ideal choice to guide the hotel into its next chapter. Miguel caught her eye from across the room, grinning. Other servers whispered among themselves, some supportive, some clearly jealous. Clara felt numb. After the meeting, she found the letter in her new office. Thick cream paper, expensive weight. Her name written in bold black ink. Clara, you earned this position. Your promotion has nothing to do with me and everything to do with your competence, your leadership, and your ability to turn a struggling hotel into one of the city's premier destinations. The hotel is yours now. What you do with it is your choice. But I'd very much like to see you at the reopening gala next Friday.
No obligations. No expectations.
Just me, hoping you'll give us a chance.
The
following Friday, the Riviera Grand Hotel hosted its grand reopening under new management. The ballroom, the same one where Clara had spilled wine on Ethan Royce, was filled with Manhattan's elite once again. But this time, Clara wasn't serving. She stood near the entrance in a midnight blue dress that Mateo had sent. She'd almost sent it back, but it fit perfectly, and she was tired of wearing the same old clothes. Her hair was down, loose waves framing her face. She looked like she belonged here. Because she did. Ms. Rossi, Raphael appeared at her elbow, looking sharp in his suit. The boss is on the terrace. He was hoping you'd join him. Clara took a deep breath and nodded. The terrace overlooked Fifth Avenue, the city lights spreading out in every direction. Mateo stood at the railing, hands in his pockets, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. He turned when he heard her heels on the stone floor. For a moment, they just looked at each other. You bought the hotel, Clara said finally. I bought 6 hotels. Seemed like a good investment. His lips twitched into an almost smile. The fact that one of them was the place where we met was just fortunate timing. You made me the general manager. I gave you the opportunity. You made yourself the general manager by being exceptional at your job. He moved toward her slowly. Everything you've accomplished, the staff respect you. The reviews have improved. The bookings are up 30%. That's all you, Clara. I just removed the obstacles. She laughed softly, shaking her head. You mean you destroyed a corporate empire and bought a hotel chain? Minor details. They stood side by side at the railing, looking out at the city. Clara could feel the warmth of him beside her, could sense his attention, even though he wasn't looking directly at her. I've been thinking, she said quietly, about what you said, about being yours. And
I am terrified.
of you, of this, of what it means to be with someone who has the kind of power you have. She turned to face him. But I'm also tired of being afraid. Tired of fighting alone. And the truth is, she took a shaky breath. The truth is, I feel safer with you than I've felt in years. Even knowing what you're capable of. Maybe because of it. Mateo's expression softened in a way she'd never seen before. Clara. Let me finish. She held up a hand. I don't know what this is. I don't know if we're crazy or if this could actually work. But I want to try. On one condition. Name it. No more secrets. No more fixing things behind my back. If we do this, if we try, we do it as equals. You don't get to control my life just because you care about me. Equals, Mateo repeated, something like wonder in his voice. He reached out, taking her hand in his. I can do that. Though I should warn you, my instinct will always be to protect you. To fight your battles. It's who I am. I know. And I'm telling you now, I don't need you to fight my battles. I need you to stand beside me while I fight them myself. She squeezed his hand. Can you do that? For you? Mateo pulled her closer until they were standing inches apart. I'll try. Though I make no promises about not destroying anyone who hurts you. Clara laughed, a real, genuine laugh that felt like freedom. I suppose I can live with that. He cupped her face in his hands, his dark eyes searching hers. You cleaned his mess that night. Now you own the floor he stood on. Tears pricked her eyes, but this time they were good tears. Grateful tears. Because Mateo was right. She'd gone from the girl shaking with fear in this very ballroom to the woman who owned it. From the victim to the victor. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me, for believing I was strong even when I didn't believe it myself. You always were. Mateo leaned down, his lips barely brushing hers. I just made sure everyone else saw it too. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home, like finding the missing piece she hadn't known she was searching for. Dangerous and safe, terrifying and comforting, all at once. Below them, the city glittered. Millions of lives, millions of stories, millions of people fighting their own battles. And on the terrace of the Riviera Grand Hotel, 2 of those people stood together, finally unafraid. The man who ruled the city and the woman who made him remember why he built it.